Hey, this is Tiger. Welcome to my stream. Hey, AJ. You made it to be the first in the chat. Thank you so much for this and the ongoing support. Nice to see you guys on this really hot evening of an incredibly hot day. End of June 2025. We are going back in time to the 1980s today and look at an historic safety system, Indusi 54. Donut Diplomat, good evening to you. So nice to see you on the chat. And since TSG are so friendly to actually implement all the historic versions of the German train protection system, it is just fair, I think, that we actually have a look at them. We already looked at the Indusi 60 system when we were running the Mittenwaldbahn, and now we're looking at the Indusi 54 and what's the difference, and still a bit the development from Indusi 54 to Indusi 60R that we had at the end of the 80s. That almost looks like PZB 90 that we know. And CD Radar, nice to see you. Stop. Doors. Doors, stop. This is to what today? To ponder about what you are trying to say. No, not PDF. Where are we actually? We are at the Linke Rheinstrecke. Again, we are running a service on the Bacharach 194. And not the Linke Rheinstrecke itself, but the Bacharach 194 E94 Rail 2 DLC I got for free as being an ambassador for Dovetail games. So, hence the disclaimer. Let's find it. Choose the route, Linke Rheinstrecke, what is really a nice route to drive. And yeah, this is our Krokodil. The only engine in the game, to my knowledge, that actually... I don't know why this stream title actually never gets used to it. I change it, and then it's still the same. Thanks for the hint, AJ. Now it should be fixed. 11 something is the service, I think. Is it 11:09? No, 11:32. 1 hour 26. Let's take some light clouds for our end of June run and see what the dynamic weather is getting us. Donut, yeah, Sunday is now there. Thank you for not letting me run around with the wrong day in the stream title. That is a new thing that the game does, right? That it shows this page until we get this beautiful picture from the Mittenwaldbahn. I wonder what this guy uses in terms of setting for his foliage and vegetation. This looks really good. So, our service, we're starting at Mainz with our freight train. We have empty freight cars, so we are not that heavy. Let's see how heavy we are. We are 841.5 tons. Spectre, hey, to see you. Nice to see you. And with our locomotive, that is already more than 120 tons. We are way beyond the 800 tons limit, so that we can actually run our locomotive in brake mode P, even, and the whole train in brake mode P. While actually, to be fair, I don't think that we could change the brake mode on the Baureihe 193 anyway. The rail tour variant and the ÖBB 1020 have a pneumatic rack where you can do it here, but not this locomotive. I read somewhere that you need to change it on the bogies, but I have not found anything in terms of it being simulated. Also not in the manual. Indusi and SIFA. SIFA Störschalter needs to go into the middle, not jump around somewhere. We already have air in our system, even though the Panto is still down and the main circuit breaker is not set yet, so we can set this to pantograph race, and it raises, then it closes the Panto, and then we can put it into the position where it can rest. We need some lights. Main circuit breaker is closed. Blowers, maybe we need them fast with this heat, and the compressor on. And then we can already get ready for departure. Proceed as signals indicate. We will try just doing this. This is our Indusi 54 equipment. We will discuss how this works in a presentation as usual. Alright. And let's see if we can release the brakes and get this thingy going. It is only releasing one cylinder. How did I do this? How did I manage to insulate one of the brake cylinders? I just operated the SIFA valve. Interesting. I did not do anything, did I? Is a heavy load for about 194? I don't think so, actually. We should be able to carry much more. And this is only a cut of empty cars. Actually, I did not know that I can isolate one bogie. Maybe this is because the brake key was locked. Ah, I see. Ah! My brake key flipped back. I thought I already unlocked it. But apparently I can only release one bogie if the brakes are not unlocked. Interesting feature. Maybe have to look into that again. But I have to turn down the volume a bit, otherwise I always have to talk against this roar. Yeah, and now proceed as signals indicate, and from what I can see over there, the signal indicates that we are not supposed to proceed if we are actually going to the right, and this is what those points look like. We're going up to a red signal. We have to wait for this 103 before we can leave the yard here. Still loud on this locomotive here, even with the windows closed. Well, if the train is actually stopping here, then it will be hard for us to go to the right track at this point. We're actually supposed to go there where this long track is wandering. Inspector said, I wonder what TSG thought when they designed the taillights on the IC cars. Not period correct. Well, I wouldn't know that, but I trust that you are totally right there. You mean those round ones? Or are you talking about a different set of IC cars? With the rectangular light. The red ones. The blue is okay, but the red ones with the rectangular light. That is not correct to say. There's another of our brethren sitting around. So what I actually would like to know, if there is any way to change the brake timing on our bogies or anywhere else on our locomotive. Because it definitely has a rating for P and for G, but I don't know where to switch from P to G on the older version of this locomotive in the game. So what are you guys doing with this train? Are you going to sit here around all day? It was at Mainz when we were waiting the other day, right? Almost forever until we go out of our station. Maybe the idea in the service was to leave before this incoming train, and I was just too slow. But well, let's see. Now it is going in the 103. That means we have a chance to be sent out. Not before the 628 is. Well, the 628 does not mind lighting the taillights at all. And now we've got a signal, isn't that nice? Stretch the train nicely with all those empty Falns cars. Offene Schüttgutwegen. And as soon as the train is stretched, we can apply a bit more power. Those wagons look well made, says Stoner Diplomat. Yeah, I guess this is a new version of those wagons that we get with this DLC. We had them in the game before, but not in this facelifted version. Now that we are out, we can go 90. This is our top speed for the locomotive anyway. This incoming limit to 60 should be signaled actually. But we're getting high greens at this point. Let's see what happens. If you see me flip through the external camera like this, then it is because otherwise you cannot go to this de-zoomed view where you can see your speed clock and the brake gauges at the same time. Because if you run in with your mouse wheel and out again, you would not believe it is raining. End of June and it is raining. Still high greens. And for this switch, why are we not getting a signal at this point that is slower than high greens? Either a rain time, rain time, rain time. And Juniper says, I love the rain. So do I. In real life even more than in the game, to be honest. Now we probably can accelerate to our 90 cruising speed. And CD Reader says he sees only one raindrop. And rains in world, yes. But it is never so true as it is on the stream. Going out via Mainz Hbf. And then the part Budenheim. Ingelheim. Until we finally get to Bingen. It's actually quite a big issue that those wipers wipe in an area. That does not help you so much because the standing position is so high that we are always looking at the signals through this part of the windscreen where the wiper is not wiping anything. We've already discussed this when we were driving the ÖBB 1020. It's the same there. So much to do, but I'll keep you open to the side. Yes, Juniper, that's the best thing to do. It will be a relaxed freight run anyway. With a bit of luck we're getting signals. So that we can see what the Indusi system is doing, and if not, I have to tell you what it would have done had we gotten any signals. Now we have to see that we don't go into speeding. But it already happened. C4 has an alarm, as you can see in here. An audible alarm and this white indicator to the left. And why is there not any chair? In my locomotive there is no chair because it is a standing locomotive. That's what people were used to, coming from the age of steam engines, that there is no chair for the driver. That's an argument like when your management tries to justify why they cut corners on a contract. Yes, I think that is the case. Drivers don't sit down. They can fall asleep when they are sitting down. Weight reduction to not have a chair? Well, probably does not make that much of a difference in a locomotive that weighs about 150% of what a Vectron weighs. Sitting is unhealthy, probably it is. Well, I was way before people asked their employees to use Stehpulte Spectre, you know these weird chairs in which you do not sit but rather kneel. Oh yeah, those. That would have been a nice touch on the E94. Yeah. And you can integrate the SIFA mechanism. As long as you're bouncing in your knees, system knows that you're alright. A bouncing board with SIFA integrated, right? But it is safer if you see an obstacle, you can just run away, not bother with standing up from any stupid chair, yeah. Especially if you're slouching in your chair with your feet up on the dashboard. So on Tuesday we are probably doing another release stream again, an unboxing stream for the Manchester airport route. If everything goes as planned. Just made it not to speed. It's either with a feet on the dashboard and you press the SIFA with crutches. Well, you have your holdover button. Don't know if we have one here. Yeah, see. Can do this with your heel. No problem at all. Problem is that you don't have any spot to rest your behind on this locomotive. I have experience with having my feet on the dashboard, yes. Not necessarily in a locomotive or a train. But in a lot of situations. It is plain day. I think now the rain has stopped finally. while I'm fiddling with the wiper, the train is slowly creeping into overspeed. That was the precursor of the Sifa lady. Well, I think I have to accept this is a decline, and there is no way to not speed except for using the brakes a bit. You can also use the dynamic brakes if you want. Let's try. And unlike in our last stream, we're actually getting a brake effort out of them. You can see it here. Bremsstrom. The old version of the Baureihe 111 with the cut of Silberlingen. Here another Krokodil with the Falns wagons. Yes, and I've driven 100 miles on this locomotive. Also, those pantographs can make some sparks. And now we are probably turning in for Bingen. Here we can see the Rhine. And now we will hug the Rhine almost all the way to Koblenz. The cockpit looks different to the Austrian one. What is the large black handle for? Grinding coffee? That one here, the sander. The round one is the manual wiper to move the wiper out of the way after it gets stuck somewhere. Then you have the train heating here. This is for main circuit breaker and the pantograph. On the white panel on the right, I mean, this one is the compressor switch. Turn on the compressor actually, just like the blowers. So there is actually quite a lot different compared to the ÖBB 1020. Different safety system. And I've shown it on the last stream how you can use the pump handle to get the pantographs up by pumping the air if your auxiliary compressor doesn't work. Bingerbrück. Bingen, Hauptbahnhof Bingen Stadt. And then the yard. At any rate, it looks nice, this route with the weather settings that we got. I set this 10. And I think as soon as we are out of the yard here, I think I will do the presentation. Yeah, that will be now. Answer, yes. How many white mint vehicles do you want? Yeah, there are a lot of white mint vehicles in the 1984 timetable. Presentation. Ansicht, Leseansicht. So, how many presentations about Indusi PZB versions do you want? The answer is yes. I cannot get enough of it. Just a short recap. We have talked about this in our video about the Indusi 60. Where does the Indusi come from? The first tests and then the implementation in running railway lines were already in the 1920s and 1930s. So this is where the name comes from, Induktive Zugsicherung. The first system that is recorded is the Indusi 34-36 pre-war, where actually nobody really knows how it worked, and not a lot is known about how the system worked. Then this all came to sad ending, because then there was the World War II, and a lot was lost, not only in terms of train protection systems, and when they picked up the train running in Germany out of the ruins again in 1947, 1949 in the Federal Republic of Germany, as well as in the German Democratic Republic. They more or less picked up what they had in terms of Indusi, and the first system in the 1950s that was used then was the I-54 system, that later was followed by the I-60, the Indusi 60 system in 1960, and that was the system that was around quite long in the German Democratic Republic. They took their time to pick it up, and then they also used some components that were built in Romania and developed a bit of their own system with slightly different values. That is sometimes called the Indusi I-60DR for Deutsche Reichsbahn. And then in the 1980s, they were actually the first to develop a microprocessor controlled system, the PZ80, and that was able to calculate brake curves, because for that you typically need microprocessors to do that. In the West, it was more or less the LZB that was developed at that time using microprocessors, and the system that was run inside the LZB environment was sometimes called Indusi I-80, what is more or less the same system that was then used on the trains that did not have LZB-80, and was called the I-60R for Rechner-unterstützt microprocessor. After reunification, there was then PZB-90 more or less that added the restricted motor to the whole thing, for example, and then different software updates to the PZB-90 system, and the only Indusi system that actually survived here before everything was put under the PZB-90 system handle was the I-60M system that runs on the 363 locomotives, those diesel shunters with very slow speeds. And you can still find that in the directives that govern the use of all those systems up to the point where, yeah, PZB and LZB is now more or less run within the ETCS level National Train Control System as a Class B system under ETCS. Those are the directives that you can find for the use of those systems altogether, and then the use for those specific implementations on the different devices that are on the trains. The I-60R with the Ereignisrekorder 24, for example. Then here the stuff that we got from the Deutsche Reichsbahn locomotiven, then the stuff that was running in the first LZB system, and then the stuff that was running on the more modern LZB system like the Epicap 500. And then for the ETCS, obviously everything is now under the roof of ETCS. And what I wanted to look at today is actually this middle part, what Indusi I-54 did, what Indusi I-60 did then on top of Indusi I-54, because I-54 is the system that we have been, well, what we have installed on our locomotive today, and then what actually got added for Indusi I-60R. We don't have an Indusi I-60R locomotive simulated in the game so far, but it always makes sense in my opinion to actually compare what was added and what is in those systems missing then, more or less. So all that is then PZB-90. That is a different story that we can talk about how this came to pass, but this is all the PZB videos where we don't say anything about it in particular. Then we are talking about System PZB-90. That is the current system for PZB, as long as you're not running under ETCS. And as I said, the I-60M survived as a system of its own. So actually Indusi I-54, what did it do in the 50s? This is our more or less line of development. We're coming from the left to the right. And there, at a certain point, there is a point of danger, a Gefahrpunkt that you want to protect. Can be a junction, can be a level crossing, can be anything that you want to protect from a train that can run in at this point. So typically at a certain distance you put up a signal that can show a red, a stop signal, and the distance between the stop signal and the danger point is called the Durchrutschweg, the overlap. So that is the distance that we take as a safety margin in case that our train does not manage to stop in front of the red signal and get stopped by whatever means of train control we have. So this is our spot that we call 0, where the signal is in front of our stop signal, because the trains need a bit of a caution, can't stop on site typically. We have in the German system those 1000 meters regular braking distance, and in front of that we typically have then a signal that tells us that we have to stop at the next signal. Our caution signal, the distance signal, Halt erwarten, VR0 for HP 0 then. And the protection, we have talked about it a lot of time, 2000 Hertz magnets in the Indusi PCB system to stop a train at the red signal, and those are active if the target speed at this point is 0. With other words, if the train has to stop in front of the signal, may not pass. Otherwise this magnet is not active, whereas the 1000 Hertz magnet as at the distance signal is active if the target speed at this point is less than 100 kilometers per hour. If it is 100 kilometers per hour or more, then this magnet is not active. We don't need to acknowledge it, we don't need to do anything but to adjust our speed to the target speed that is valid at this 0 point. So this was everything already in Indusi 54. This is nothing new. Also already in that system is something that we still sometimes struggle with: GPAs, Geschwindigkeitsprüfabschnitte, overspeed sensor loops, something that the TPWS system in the UK, for example, also knows. We have in our piece of track for speeds 100 and higher a 2000 Hertz magnet at some strategic point that is accompanied by 2 switching magnets, and that start a timer on the train. And if the train is too fast, then at the point that it hits the 2000 Hertz magnet, it will initiate a penalty brake. So this is something that was already in Indusi I-54. It is nothing that was just invented recently, but it is still in use in those situations where you have to target for a speed of 100 or higher. The same thing in a different version where not the 2000 Hertz but the 1000 Hertz magnet is accompanied by switching magnet happens in those situations where the target speed is 80 or 90 kilometers per hour. Here the same system works in a way that you only get the 1000 Hertz signal for your train if you are faster than 15 kilometers above the target speed. Otherwise you don't get the 1000 Hertz. We have videos about the GPAs, one video dedicated to the GPAs. We have obviously this situation here with the 80 and 90 discussed in our PZBO video, the basic one. So this is nothing new, and it is already a part of the implementation of Indusi 54. So you would think, well, where is something that I have not known so far? There is actually a lot that is still alive in 2025 in trains that are using PZB or those things. And CD Radar says, I hate these overspeed sensor loops. I think, yeah, they can be quite tricky because you think, well, I have so much time to adjust to my speed, and then bang, you get a penalty brake out of nowhere. And sometimes they are quite restrictive, right? So you need to know that they are there. What is also something that we know from day one, more or less, is that we have to acknowledge our 1000 Hertz signal by hitting our Wachsamkeitstaste, our vigilance key, our acknowledge button, or whatever you want to call it. Wachsamkeitstaste is the word that the system uses here, and you have got a time span of 4 seconds after the train picks up the 1000 Hertz signal, and then you press the Wachsamkeitstaste, and if you fail to do that, you get the penalty break. If you don't fail to do it, then the system is happy and it does its speed check. And what is the speed check? Actually, here in the Indusi I-54 system, and this is where it is more rudimentary than the PCB90 that we know, it just waited for a couple of seconds, 20, in the highest operation mode, O, what is called nowadays, PCBO we would call it now, and it just counts down 20 seconds after the 1000 Hertz signal, and then it checks the train. Is it faster than 95 kilometers per hour? Is it faster than 95 kilometers per hour? Then it initiates a penalty break. If not, then the system is happy and switches off. And yeah, we know that from PCB we have OMU, obere, mittlere und untere, so 3 different classes and speed regimes. And for the medium one it was 75 after 26 seconds, and for the lowest it was 60 after 34 seconds. So those speed gates the train had to make to get under within this time frame, and what happened in between, the system didn't care. What happened afterwards, the system didn't care. It was just at this point the speed was checked, and if the test was not good, then a penalty break. If the test was good, then the system was happy and switched off. So very, very one point Punktförmige Zugbeeinflussung at its best. Not only we are only getting our signals at one point, but the system also only checks at this one point. And then one thing that is specific for the I-54 in comparison to I-60 is that the mode was hardwired into the trains and locomotives, so only the workshop was able to change those values, and you did not have your switch in the cab or in the engine room where you could switch from mode O to M or U, but it was your train was just set to one mode. Like our locomotive here in this service that we are running is set to the medium M. Said knowing a guy in the workshop might have helped suspect. Yeah, maybe. But then you can read, and you can see I got most of my knowledge from the Zusi manual, actually, because they have a nice part about the different Indusi systems, and I checked it with forums and stuff and whatever I could get hold of. And there you can read that in the late 1950s and beginning 60s, they realized that the speed of 95 is actually really quite fast to actually have an effect of slowing down the train properly. And they there you can read that some locomotives with lower top speeds had slower speeds set for this point, like 90 or 80. Some sources say even higher speeds at this point. So this was actually something that was not written in stone, obviously, and knowing a guy in the workshop, as you say, Spectre, might have helped to set your speed a couple of clicks higher or lower at this point. Well, so that was the thing, but the main characteristic, it only checks at this one point, not before, not later. And another thing to remember at this point is that O, M, and U for the 3 different modes of operation was not what they were called in the beginning. In the beginning you can read a lot like D for the highest mode, and P for the medium one, and G for the lowest one. Almost like with the brake settings, like G for goods, P for passengers, and then it is not R for rapid, but D for Durchgangszüge, D-Züge, I don't know, at least for this, the fastest trains. So if you read about Indusi D and P and G mode, then it is O and M and U in, well, in the abbreviations that they used in the 1950s and 60s. So don't get confused at this point and don't think, oh, since when is there a PZB mode G? I thought this is only a brake setting. No, it was actually a Indusi mode at this time. Yeah, and if someone talks about he's driving his train in Indusi G, then either he's talking about his brake setting or he was socialized in the 1950s. The 500 Hertz magnet existed already in the Indusi I-54 environment, was put up at about 250 meters in front of our signal. And as we have it today, the 500 Hertz magnet is active if the target speed is lower than 40 kilometers per hour. So if you have to stop, what is obviously lower than 40 kilometers per hour, but also if you are supposed to slow down to 10, 20, 30 or 35 kilometers per hour, also then you get the 500 Hertz magnet. That comes sometimes as a surprise because not everybody knows that for those speeds you also get the 500 Hertz, and then you need to be careful with releasing and stuff because 500 Hertz influencing after you have released will result in an immediate penalty brake. OG mode, yes, OG would be PZB O and the G at the same time. Probably not what you want to be. Our 500 Hertz magnet, what did it do? It did a second gate and a second check. It checked for the D trains for 65, for the P trains for 50, and for the G trains for 40. Again at this point, so more or less a system that puts up two gates that you have to pass through with your train unless you don't, unless you want a penalty brake. At the first point here 95 and then 65, and after that it is up to the driver to not run the signal. And you can see with 65 you can still rush that signal quite a bit and get close to the danger point and need a lot of overlap for this to be safe. Indicator wise, since the mode was not able to be switched on the locomotive and was hardwired into the vehicle, you only needed one indicator, the blue one that told you that the system is active, and the yellow one that came active after you got a 1000 Hertz influencing and hit your vigilance key. Then the yellow one lights up steadily next to the blue one typically, and after this first speed test was done successfully, so after 20 seconds and you're below the 95, then it would go off again and the blue one would still be on. I think this is what most people agree on, that it worked or would work. Somewhere you can read that the blue one can go flashing in this time or in this interval or in this state of the system. But the most important thing is your yellow lamp goes on. You know from this yellow lamp once that you hit your vigilance key within the time frame, and two, that the train is doing the speed check for the first gate that you have to pass through. There was no red lamp for the 500 Hertz, and this was a check that was done without you actually seeing anything. And one important thing to know is about these old early versions in Indusi I-54 especially, is that if there was one monitoring running, there could not start a second monitoring. You have this quite a lot. You get, for example, a VR2 signal. You have to acknowledge it. You get your 1000 Hertz monitoring, a yellow lamp goes on, and a couple of 100 meters later you pass an LF6 sign that tells you that the line speed will drop to 60 or whatever, and you have to acknowledge that again. And on a modern train, you would see how the yellow 1000 Hertz lump goes up for a little bit and on again, so you can see, yes, it started the second monitoring. With those old versions, there was no way that the system could pick up a second monitoring and a second influencing. If it was doing the speed check, then it was doing the speed check, and after the speed check it went back to its standby state. And if it picked up a second 1000 Hertz before the speed check was done, nobody noticed that, so the safety system at least did not notice it. In case you did not hit your Wachsamkeitstaste in time, or you did not make the speed test, you get a penalty break. I think the blue light would turn off at this point and the yellow one should go flashing. Then you know you got a penalty break. And this was in the beginning a penalty break that took you down to a stop, and you could not release from this penalty break by hitting your Freitaste before the train actually stopped, came to a standstill. So you had to go to a standstill with your brake pipe drained, and after that Freitaste release, and then the brake pipe was you were able to fill your brake pipe again. So that threw you back quite some time, and it took some time to actually get the train running again. On the other hand, it was not mandatory at this time to actually call your dispatcher after a penalty break, so it was apparently up to your discretion to start the train again after you found out why you got the penalty break in the first place. It wasn't before, I think, the millennium, or about the millennium, where it was made mandatory that you would contact your dispatcher or signaler, Fahrdienstleiter, after getting a penalty break. Interesting thing also is that the release key was only for releasing from the penalty break. There was not a thing to release at the signal change, like you're starting to slow down, your lamp comes off at some certain point, and you might not want to slow down for the 500 Hertz. Well, as soon as the signal changes and the 500 Hertz goes inactive, then probably you would not have to make this gate at this point. But this other thing, like the release from monitoring, from restricted monitoring, from normal monitoring after the signal upgrades, is a thing that was not installed before PZB90 actually. So no release. So the release key in its original function was to release you from the penalty break, not release you while running up to a signal that had upgraded. The Befehltaste was already there, so Wachsamkeitstaste, Freitaste, Befehlstaste was part of the original system, those three keys, to be able to pass an active 2000 Hertz magnet with authority. But there was no indicator in the beginning, so no white indicator here, and more important, there was no speed restriction. So actually hitting your override key, your Befehlstaste, was able to, or enabled you to pass a 2000 Hertz magnet at the red signal with 160 or whatever your train was able to go, right? So that was how the system was built at this time. There was no restricted monitoring. We saw that on the slide before, that it was not introduced before PZB90. And one thing that was only fixed with PZB90 version 2.0 or something, that changing the direction, stopping, putting the reverser to backwards, putting the reverser to forwards again, deleted an ongoing monitoring at this point. So if it annoyed you that you got into a restricted monitoring at the end, or some monitoring at all, you could just stop, put the reverser to backwards, then forwards again, and then the monitoring was away. You were not allowed to do that, but it was possible. So what did it look like, and what does it look like in the game? The Indusi I-54 on the train that we are just running, the BR-194. Two indicators, one blue one. Here in our system, the guy in the workshop put a sticker with a 75 on it so that we know that we are set to mode P or M, and our yellow light for the 1000 Hertz. And then those three switches, the Indusi Befehl, what is the override key, the Indusi Frei, what is for releasing after penalty break, and Indusi Wachsam, what is to acknowledge the 1000 Hertz monitorings. So that was the system Indusi I-54. And now let's look what changed for the Indusi I-60 system. I-54 to Indusi I-60. So the most important difference is, you can see it here, that the mode now can be switched on the locomotive. We don't need our good contacts to the workshop anymore, but we can do it on our locomotive. We have a switch here where we can switch from D to P to G or O, M, U, whatever you have on the caption on your machine. And this results in the fact that we need additional indicators. There is not one blue lamp enough anymore, but now we have 3 blue lamps, sometimes arranged this way, sometimes like in a 2x2, sometimes in a different way, and they are marked with the modes, and the modes are typically marked with the speeds that the system is checking you for after the 1000 Hertz influencing. So if you're running in mode U, then this blue lamp would be on. If you're running in mode M or P, then this would be on, and in the highest mode D or O, it would light up this one, and the rightmost one is the yellow lamp that goes on after the 1000 Hertz and the Wachsamkeitstaste, and that goes off after the speed check again. So this is the big difference, and almost all the difference. All the rest is more or less true for Indusi I-60. That was already true for Indusi I-54, also with the penalty brake flashing yellow lamp, and then Frei after penalty brake and stop. No release for signal change, no restricted monitoring. Changing direction deletes the monitoring, and still, if one monitoring is running, a second monitoring cannot be initiated. Also for the override key, we have no indicator and no speed restriction connected with it. So those two systems, I-54 and I-60, are implemented on the different versions of the Deutsche Krokodil locomotive. The I-54 here in this rail tour pack with the Baureihe 194. On the Baureihe 194, the E94088 rail tour locomotive has a much more modern system. It's already a PZB90 system, I think. And the ÖBB 1020 runs the Indusi I-60 system. And how can we see that? Because it has this nice indicator here on the ÖBB 1020. And you need to know that in Austria they did not use the G or U mode in PZB60. They only used the upper and medium mode, and this is why you only have 3 lamps, the 2 blue lamps and 1 yellow one. And depending on what you set your lever to, because now you can switch the modes, you either have the medium or the middle lamp in blue lit, or the left one lit in blue. And you can also see that on this plate there are the speeds engraved actually, and it gives you here I don't know if you can read it, a D9565, and this is the D mode. So here on this caption you can actually see the old abbreviation for PZB mode O, and those 2 speeds that the system is checking you against, the 95 and the 65 at the 500 Hertz. Same here for the middle lamp P, what is the old abbreviation for the PZBM mode, and 75, 50, 75 and 50. And on the yellow lamp to the right, it tells you what how much time you have to be at your speeds. For D, what is PCB mode O, 20 seconds, that is those 20 seconds, and P, 26 seconds, that is those 26 seconds, right? So this all confirms what you can read in the SUSI manual, and it makes sense what is written here on the machine. And below that you have the Befehl, Frei and Wachsamkeitstasten on your ÖBB 1020. On the Baureihe 111 in the Mittenwaldbahn, you have a more modern indicator pack, still for I60 obviously. You have the 95, you have the 75 and the 60 as indicators. SIVA indicator, door indicator, main circuit breaker indicator, train line indicator, dynamic brake indicator, indicator for the R brake, increased brake force, and then the yellow lamp here for the 1000 Hertz. What is not here in this pack is the white indicator for the Befehl 40 program, and what is not there is a red lamp for the 500 Hertz, from what we know from the PZB 90 actually. This tells you that even though this looks more modern than this thing on the ÖBB 1020, it is still an Indusi I60 system. So what actually was added then when the system got updated to the I60R with microprocessors now? So upgrading I60 to I60R, what happened sometime during the 80s, so the Baureihe 111 that we have in the 1989 themed Mittenwaldbahn is actually a bit oldish then, because it does not run Indusi I60R yet. So let's see what actually survives from what we have seen so far. I updated the signals now that we are in the 80s. We no longer use semaphores, but we have the HV system here now. The rest is so far the same. Mode obviously can be switched. This is since we have I60, and the I60R is more or less the same system that also runs as the system in the LZB80 LZB computer that emulates the PCB functionality. There it is sometimes called the Indusi I80, but it is Indusi 80 is not a term that you read a lot in my opinion. So what was one thing that was introduced? Now we have for the first time a ceiling speed control. That is a word from ETCS more or less. It tells you that there is a constant control of the maximum authorized speed in your train, and this was not there before. It was something that was introduced with the I60R. So for Indusi mode O, the train would constantly check that you are not going beyond the 165. For M, the 125, and for U, the 105. So typically with all those speeds, you know that you have to stay 5 clicks below as a safety margin. So you can go 160 in O, 120 in M, and 100 in U. And this was checked all the time. And if you went beyond that speed, you would get a horn sound at first. And if you would still go further on, like to 169, 129, 109, so not only 5 clicks above, but 4 kilometers per hour above the margin that the system controls you against, then you will get a penalty brake. But it is not a penalty brake that will stop you necessarily, but it will release itself after it has slowed down the train to this ceiling speed. Might have encountered this a couple of times already in the game. This is still something that we have in the PZB 90, the ceiling speed control with a self-releasing penalty brake if you go a couple of clicks beyond those speeds, and that was introduced with the I60R. And this enables us to actually do a proper brake curve control, not only put up some gates after a couple of seconds, but control the train after we get the 1000 hertz influencing to this point and further on. And this is why, for example, in the PCB O mode, Indusi O mode, we did not check for 95 after 20 seconds anymore, but we have a brake curve. It starts 2.5 seconds after hitting the 1000 hertz, and then it is constantly checking your speed, whether you are actually slowing down. Until then, 20 seconds, this is still the same value, you are at the 95, and then it is checking you on that you don't accelerate again beyond the 95. And this is a dynamic check against the brake curve that needs to be done with the microprocessor. And 300 meters in front of the red signal, so after about 700 meters after you got the 1000 hertz influencing, if the signal is exactly at 1000 meters, this control would end. Then the speed check that results from the 1000 hertz ends at this point. And respectively for mode M, same here. From the ceiling speed control, we go into the brake curve control, and then we have a lower ceiling speed control here at this point at 75. So the values, the same 95, 75, 60s, but now we have actually running brake curve control dynamically throughout, starting 2.5 seconds after the influencing until we get to the 20, 26, 34 seconds that were predefined in the system, and then a constant check to the lower speed so that the train does not accelerate again. So I was able to take out my round points. We have no more gates, but we have a constant control from the 1000 hertz, or at least 2.5 seconds later, for 700 meters. So 700 meters after the 1000 hertz magnet, we have this control against a constantly dropping speed, and then again a constant speed. With this ability of the system, they also changed what the 500 hertz influencing did. Interesting enough, that check for 40 kilometers in PZB mode U apparently survived for the lowest mode, for Indusi mode U. The system would check you at the 500 hertz to not be faster than 40, but for the higher modes, again, it would do a brake curve control from the 65 that we had before to, we will see, 45. And the same here from the 50 that we have before to 45, but with different distances. In PZB mode O, or Indusi mode O, you have 180 meters, so not time-wise anymore, but distance-wise. And in PZB, or Indusi, I should say, M, you have 120 meters to slow down from 50 to 45, as we can see. And in Indusi mode U, actually, you had to be below the 40, but then afterwards the system would only check you against 45. So that is a bit weird, and it ends 200 meters after the 500 hertz magnet, and then there is only the red signal with the 2000 hertz magnet. So the 45 is more or less the release speed that you get, and then you have to handle this red signal, and the overlap must be calculated in a way that it can stop the train with a top speed of 45. Or whatever speed it can pick up additionally after the 500 hertz monitoring ends, before we get to the 2000 hertz. The indicators now look a bit different. We have those 95, 75, 60 indicators that we have already seen on the Baureihe 111. The yellow lamp for the 1000 hertz, but now we also get a red lamp for the 500 hertz. The mode switching is the same. We light that lamp that we are actually in, like if we are in Indusi mode O, then the 95 indicator would be lit up. After hitting the Wachsamkeitstaste and 1000 Hertz influencing, the yellow lamp would turn on. That is nothing new compared with the newer systems. But what is actually new in the i60R is that if one monitoring is already running, a second monitoring can be initiated and will run parallel to the first monitoring. So the system can have a second monitoring run in the background, and if the first monitoring is done, then the second one will still be brought to its end. This is what sometimes can confuse you if you get overlapping 1000 Hertz monitorings, for example. And this only is possible in i60R and later. What is also new, what we did not have before, is the 500 Hertz lamp, but first at the point after 700 meters after the 1000 Hertz influencing, the yellow lamp would turn off again. And if you hit the 500 Hertz magnets, now the red lamp indicates that to you. That is something that did not happen in Indusi i60 because there was no red lamp on your dashboard. Hitting the 500 Hertz magnet was not something that the system told you. Penalty brake situation, you would get the flashing yellow lamp typically if you fail to hit your Wachsamkeitstaste in time, or if you fail to comply with the brake curve here and slow down properly. But with the release ability after the penalty brake, they made it easier to refill your brake pipe, so you don't need to actually get to a stop to be able to release from the penalty brake. But since i60R, you have to slow down to slower than 30 kilometers, then you can actually release, and the brake pipe can be filled already while you are coming to a stop. You still have to come to a stop within 15 seconds after releasing, otherwise you will get a new penalty brake. But if you handle this properly, then you can fill your brake pipe while going from 30 kilometers per hour to the stop, and then you don't need to wait so long to be able to start your train again. Another thing that was new in Indusi i60R. What is also new is that, at least on some systems, you can get a different indicator alignment. If you get a 500 Hertz penalty brake, then the red lamp will be lit while the yellow one is flashing, and after hitting a 2000 Hertz penalty brake, both of them, the yellow and the red one, can be flashing. At least on some systems it is like this. Indusi i60. And what did Indusi i60 introduce as well at the first time? Now we have the white Befehl 40 indicator, so that is quite a recent addition to our blue ones, the yellow one, the red one, and then the white one. And with the introduction of this indicator, there was also a speed control connected with going across a 2000 Hertz magnet by force of pressing the override key. It will not allow you to go faster than 45 at this point. This is why it is called Befehl 40, because you always have to stay 5 clicks below what the system is checking you against. And remember, or we go back with our thoughts to i60. Without the R, there it was possible to pass the 2000 Hertz magnet with any speed as long as you held down the override key. Yeah, I think this is already almost the end. The next thing would be then PZB 90 version 1.5, but this is a different story, and we will talk about this maybe if we get locomotive in the game that actually runs the i60R program without the PZB 90 update. And then we will see how we got things like the restricted monitoring, how things were fixed, like that you cannot forget the monitorings by moving your reverser back and forth, and so on. Well, I hope you enjoyed my little excursion in the history of Indusi and German safety systems. So if PZB 90 is not confusing enough for you, then it makes always sense to look into the precursor versions. For me, it is always interesting to see how those things develop and why they develop that way. How some of the things that we do here are super old and some are a quite recent addition. And now the Rhine. I like how the cars are stopping here at this level crossing. Almost every time you pass here, you will see a car stopping there. So did any one of you guys, except for CD Radar, I know this because I talked to you, join the Train Sim World Dovetail Games Steam Summer Sale event with the marathon stream and the ambassadors' contributions? Oh no, I must have missed it, Spectre. Well, yeah. Actually, they had asked for contributions like 2 weeks ago or something, and I don't know why, whether they cannot announce the Steam Summer Sale before it actually goes live or whatever. It was not announced anywhere. So I got the notification that the stream is actually happening like 14 minutes before it started. That was a bit weird. Otherwise I would have invited you on my Discord, obviously. Yeah, I can understand that, Spectre, that you're not so active in the forums, but even if you had, it would not have helped you at all because there was no notification for it. Anyway. Niederrheimbach. This allows for some nice views at any rate. Yeah, after all, it was actually a quite nice stream, this marathon stream. At some point there were almost only moderators and ambassadors present in the chat. But still, I enjoyed myself. Now we might be speeding again a bit. Now we just made it. Another one of those 103s. Good thing that we're not getting any signals, so I can look out of the window. FIFA. Now I'm going into speeding. Do you know, Spectre asked whether the E94 actually ran on the left Rhine route in the 80s? I think they were rather present in southern Germany, but in Nordrhein-Westfalen or Rhineland-Palatinate I do not recall them. I don't really know. I think I remember someone from TSG say that they actually ran this route. Also the Ludwigsbahn Mannheim-Kaiserslautern. But I did not verify that, so... I cannot tell you from my own knowledge. But this is why in this timetable there are no passenger services, only in the scenarios, because at this time those locomotives were only used for freight runs. I think we just passed Oberwesel. I was a little boy then, so I am not sure either, although I was at the station with my parents off. Yeah, this is a bit of a pity, but as a child I was not really interested in trains. So I don't even remember what I saw then. Saw the Rheingold and other TE trains, often quite a sight. Oh yeah, that must have been a sight. Tunnel. And still no signal. And look what is there. Die Lorelei. Well, I have never noticed that when driving there as a stoner diplomat. Because you were not looking out of your window properly. Probably. But when we're talking about Rheingold and the Lorelei, this all fits into the same. Now we're apparently going really uphill because speed dropped significantly. Okay, the keyboard shorts for the brakes are a bit weird. Did we get a signal after all? No, we did not get a signal. You know what this alarm is? This is an overload alarm for the dynamic brakes. If we're loading too heavily with the dynamic brakes, then they complain. Then you have to crank down your dynamic brakes. Last 20 kilometers. We're going to Koblenz Mosel Güterbahnhof. That means we're running through Koblenz station. And at least then we should get some kind of a signal to see how our Indusi I-54 system works. Now we're actually getting a signal. Remember 75 after, what was it, 26 seconds? And then for 50. For the 500 Hertz, it will not tell us that we hit the 500 Hertz. After all, the signal cleared in the approach. We could not release from the monitoring, but it was also not necessary. And now we have to release our brakes before we can go on properly. And Donut Diplomat says, where is everyone and why is this amazing stream so empty and just Spectre and I left in the chat? Well, I think AJ fell asleep and it is a hot day. Thank you for calling it an amazing stream. Maybe it is too boring with those old locomotives and old systems. It is still amazing to me how few people in the train simulator community actually care about safety systems and stuff like this. Crocodiling ain't easy, suspect. True. Well, I sometimes don't, if I'm being honest. Well, yeah. Now we have to get our heavy train back to speed after they shook us awake with the VR0 signal. Yeah, it is totally clear. You don't always need to be too much into signaling and safety system and everything. But I think it adds so much to the game. And especially with those historic things. We got the awake AJ with the signal. Oh, I think this won't wake her. The truth is that you get much more or many more likes if you make 3-minute videos about some new livery being released or in a mod than with videos about safety systems, but well, this is how it is. Would be interesting to know how people actually play the game. I mean, when I start with Cologne Aachen, he says, Spectre, it was fun blasting without a care, but with 250 kilometers per hour. But soon I wanted to play it realistically. Yeah, same here more or less. I started with the Sampage grade, and I did not really pay a lot of attention to the speed limits, and I was playing with the HUD and everything, and thought like, nobody can actually see all those signals. They are just whooshing by. And why do I have 3 different brake systems on my locomotive? But after a while you think, Donuts says I started on the Würzburg-Kassel and it was fun for like the first time. Then I got bored and decided to learn safety systems and signals. Yeah, I guess this is how it happened to us as well. Spectre says Trains in World 3 was a cool iteration of the game. Lots of cool content. Kassel-Würzburg, the revisited southeastern high speed. Yo! What was the American route for Trains in World 3? Just a little trivia. Cajon Pass, yes. We will never forget. Of all people I should know, and I do know. That was an iconic spat. And I still think that the signal was placed in a really unfortunate position. The stream was epic, thank you. Well, I have to admit, in the past weeks there have been so many releases that I have really trouble keeping up with everything. And I don't find the time to play as much of the older content that I still like to. Donut Diplomat, you just passed Boppard, the station which I missed today. Oh yeah, Boppard. What is a weird name actually. I always think, how would you get to a name like Boppard? In the Hessian dialect, we're not in Hesse, but in Rhineland-Palatinate, I know. It would sound like something that Andy Warhol invented. Trechtlingshausen or whatever it is called. Yeah, Trechtlingshausen was before Boppard. It's one of the first stations that you get to when you're coming from Bingen. Niederrheimbach. Well, for me the weirdest German names are actually in the Dresden Riesa DLC. Krane Bittenspector, yes. Kötsche Broda, Ditschewitz, or whatever those names are. Like, what is Dresden-Trachau? Which one is Dresden-Trachau? I don't even remember that one. Well, I guess everything is weird unless this is what you are used from at home, and then towards Riesa, I see. It's the next station after Neustadt. Meißen-Triebitztal to Radebeul-Weintraube. Radebeul-Weintraube is a station name I never really understood. Why would it be called Weintraube? Is there like a tavern that is called the Weintraube? Yeah, Radebeul Ditschewig. Is it not Zitzschewitz? Zitzschewig, okay. Yes, but isn't this game not about respecting everybody's names and trains and safety systems? I really love this about this game, that you can just hop from Saxon to Lancashire to Rhode Island to Vorarlberg to Switzerland. It's beautiful. Spectre, named after a winery, which is fun. I think Matt or some UK streamer once mentioned that a lot of railway installations are named after pubs. Oh, almost missed my signal. And now you saw we got a Zwangsbremsung, because at the 500 Hertz we were still at like 55. Let's see if it works as we discussed it on the presentation. The yellow one is flashing, the blue one is off. We came to a standstill, and now we should be able to release. Yes. It is still flashing, sound is off. Probably we have to release the brakes. And then the system comes back. Yeah. Blue one is on, yellow one is off. Good thing that I found my signal for a Zwangsbremsung. Otherwise I would have needed to do a special experiment for it. On the other hand, it tells you that you really have to apply your brakes heavily if you want to slow down a freight train with this locomotive. Oh, and I just found out today that you can get 33k points in a single run on the Linke Rheinstrecke if you drive a full line with all stops. Stopping actually gives you a lot of points. So, do you think the cars have released? I used the cab lights. That was not my intention. So, kudos to TSG. The system worked as we expected it to work. We checked for 50 at the 500 Hertz. The yellow indicator flashed until it was released by hitting the Freitaste and releasing the brakes, and then the blue indicator turned on again. So, back at speed. Last leg to Koblenz. And now a VR2, right? No. It was just a distance signal from behind. They're still running on high greens. I wonder why the main reservoir is so full. Well, yeah, 10 bars is okay. It's just the red line is at 8. Or will be critical if it falls below. Sometimes in the approach, the backside of the distance signals look like they are yellow. And with a zoomed out view, you don't see the signals that nicely. And still no VR2. But only 4.4 km/h stop at the Güterbahnhof. That means we should be getting some slow speed signal when we're going through Koblenz main. No, still high greens. Well, they will find a way for us to go through the station. It's like the next one from now, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. .75 is already done. And now the question when to release the brakes so that we can go back to 40 nicely without going too slow. Now we're losing about 20 kilometers when releasing from 2 bars in the brake cylinders on the loco. And stop. Yes, that gave us 1000 hertz. We are already below 40, so we don't need to slow down extra for the safety systems, but still for the signal, obviously. Especially since they told us that the braking distance is shorter than usual. Signal that we are approaching a clear, though. One more 1000 hertz, and the next signal allows us still to pass. Well, I guess you're not wrong about that, City Raider. I'm not wrong about what? That the next signal is allowing us to pass. Yeah, well, that was not a very hard prediction to make. Still have to accelerate a bit so that we don't dawdle too much on the line here. Now this is the way to the Güterbahnhof freight yard. Trapeztafel to the left. And now I probably missed the signal that was here to the right while I was looking at the Trapeztafel here. Yeah, probably this one. And I did not hit the Wachsamkeitstaste, and we got a Zwangsbremsung with a flashing yellow light. So all correct and as expected. Indicator changed. Bremszylinder are Indusi again, yeah. Well, this happens if you use the external cameras too much, but this is just helpful in a stream where we are discussing how the system works. Then we need some examples for the penalty brakes, right? So I have to play a bit more loose so that we actually get penalty brakes. Because if I pay attention, then I never get myself to actually force penalty brakes. I guess brakes on the train are still releasing. No, they did. It takes 5 business days for the brakes to release on them. Yeah. It's not so much the Baureihe 194, I guess, but it's the cars that take their time to release. But no restricted monitoring, we're back to the 75 monitoring. Or the 75 awareness state. So the system allows the driver to just go on without doing anything at this point. Next thing will be the 500 Hertz. And then the 2000. The radar, oh, it is like the blue small loco. That is never able to fill brake pipe and you are stuck forever. What was that again? It seems to ring a bell, but I'm not entirely sure what loco you are talking about. So this is probably our 500 Hertz that is coming up there. And then we have to stop in front of the signal. Talking about the 365. Is that good enough? No, 18 meters short or 18 meters short. But with those brakes, for the first time driving a train like this on this locomotive, you need to stop short, otherwise you will always bad. And I don't want to test the 2000 Hertz Zwangsbremsung, because then the game ends. But now, on the spot. Yeah, one thing about this DLC, at the moment we are not getting a medal. Why are we not getting a medal? Have I played this before? No, I have not played this before. So what is the problem actually? Exactly 1.5 hours. That's not diplomat. Well, yep, exactly. How long did I stream? 2 hours 20 with the presentation. But the running of the service was exactly 1.30. So they actually want you to go really close to the signal here. So you need to be really privy with your brakes. Somehow this looks like you're on a ship, right, when you're standing or driving this locomotive. Yeah, but what I wanted to say about the DLC, for whatever reason, the medal limits for the timetable runs are not specified, so you're not getting any medals for it. Pack it up, all they want is 2000 Hertz. Maybe. But I don't want it. So if you look at this timetable, all you get is 0, 0, 0 values. And the one that we just drove, I got 4,872 points and no medal, because there are no medal thresholds specified. Only this check mark that you did it. That needs to be fixed. Obviously, it is not only for the Bacharach 194, but for the whole timetable. This is the loco that you're talking about, CD Radar, eh? How could be Pepsi cheaper than Coca-Cola? I don't know. I would prefer Coca-Cola over Pepsi anytime. Yeah. Guys, that was that. I hope the timetable will be fixed soon. It is fun driving the Bacharach 194, but you actually need to focus a bit on it. I did not really focus today, but showcase the landscape and group myself into two Zwangsbremsungen and to show how the Indusi 54 system works. From what I've seen, it works as expected, and I hope you enjoyed my little journey into the history of the Indusi system and how it developed from Indusi 54 over Indusi 60 to Indusi 60R. Maybe we are back on Tuesday with... Yeah, I know, CD Radar. Maybe on Tuesday, when we have a release there. If we don't have a release for Manchester Airport commuter, then not. Then I will do it when the release is actually. If it happens, then I will be there and we can talk about this DLC. Yeah, the 365, I like it as well, the V60. Thanks for the streams, Inspector. Thanks, guys, for supporting me and for talking to me and staying with me all the time. See you soon. If not on Tuesday, then sometime else. Take care. Be nice to each other. And, well, whatever you do, get through this summer heat until the weather gets finally better again. Bye-bye.